They deserve to be remembered. The Nazis wanted to eradicate who they were, what they stood for, and to destroy their future.
A rusted metal door sealed for 80 years. Behind it, researchers expected old paperwork from the Third Reich. Instead, when the archives of the International Tracing Service in Bad Arolsen were finally opened in 2008, they uncovered the machinery the Nazis used to sort human beings for survival or death. Among the recovered documents was a faded chart from Dachau concentration camp memorial site. 6 columns, 5 rows, 30 colored triangles, red for political prisoners, green for criminals, pink for homosexuals, purple for Jehovah's Witnesses, black for those the regime labeled asocial, yellow for Jews. At a glance, guards could instantly decide who deserved food, punishment, forced labor, or execution. But the archives revealed something even darker. The triangles not only shape how guards behaved, they shaped how prisoners treated one another, who shared bread, who warned others about selections, who was abandoned. The Nazis had built a system that turned prisoners into participants in their own destruction. To understand the triangle system, you first have to understand what the concentration camps were designed to become. They were not ordinary prisons. They were industrial systems of control and extermination. When Adolf Hitler came to power in 1933, the first camps were chaotic. Political enemies, communists, trade unionists, and dissidents were dumped into abandoned factories, military barracks, and makeshift detention centers. Guards operated without standard rules. Prisoners wore no uniforms and carried no classifications. But Heinrich Himmler saw disorder as inefficiency. If the camps were going to process thousands and eventually millions of people, the system needed standardization. Guards had to identify prisoners instantly, determine who could work, who could enforce discipline, and who should die first. By 1937, the SS introduced the triangle system across the concentration camps. Each prisoner wore colored triangles sewn onto the chest and trouser leg, visible from every angle. Red triangles identified political prisoners, communists, resistance fighters, anyone viewed as an ideological threat. Many were educated and organized, which made them useful to the SS as prisoner functionaries. Green triangles marked criminals. The Nazis considered them brutal and useful for enforcing discipline. Many became capos, prisoner overseers feared even by fellow inmates. Pink triangles identified homosexual men, imprisoned under paragraph 175, the German law criminalizing same-sex relations. They endured some of the worst treatment in the camps. Guards despised them, and other prisoners often isolated them. Their survival rates became catastrophically low. Purple triangles marked Jehovah's Witnesses, imprisoned because they refused military service, Nazi salutes, or loyalty oaths. The SS offered them freedom if they renounced their faith. Most refused. Black triangles labeled asocials, the homeless, unemployed, alcoholics, prostitutes, Roma and Sinti people, and anyone deemed unfit for Nazi society. The category was intentionally vague, allowing authorities to target almost anyone. Blue triangles identified immigrants and Germans who had fled the regime before returning, people suspected of disloyalty or espionage. And then came yellow. Jewish prisoners wore 2 yellow triangles combined into the shape of the Star of David. Often another triangle was layered over it to indicate a secondary classification, political, criminal, or a social. But inside the camps, the yellow star overruled everything else. Jewish prisoners occupied the absolute bottom of the hierarchy. They received the harshest labor assignments, the lowest food rations, and the earliest selections for the gas chambers. The system reduced identity to a color-coded death ranking. The cruelty of the design was its simplicity. Guards no longer needed files or explanations. A glance at a uniform was enough. But soon the prisoners themselves began using the classifications. Inside the camps, survival became tied to triangle status. Political prisoners, especially the Reds, often rose within the prisoner hierarchy because they understood organization and bureaucracy. Many became capos or block elders managing internal camp operations. Green triangle prisoners competed for those same positions. In some camps, they dominated through violence. In others, political prisoners pushed them aside. At places like Buchenwald Memorial, power struggles between prisoner groups became constant and deadly. These positions carried real authority. A capo could assign a prisoner to lighter work, or send him to the stone quarry where exhaustion killed men within weeks. A block elder could share extra soup with friends or let others starve. The camps distributed power downward, forcing prisoners into moral collapse. And the triangle system determined who stood lowest in that hierarchy. Jewish prisoners marked with yellow stars were systematically excluded from positions of influence. When food was stolen, it was stolen from Jews first. When guards demanded punishment victims, Jews were selected first. When transports arrived for the gas chambers, Jews went first. The triangle was not merely an identification, it was a target. The archives opened in 2008 contained millions of prisoner registration cards. Each card reduced a human life to bureaucratic data: name, birth date, profession, nationality, prisoner number, and triangle classification. Historians analyzing the cards discovered survival patterns never fully documented before. Political prisoners had relatively high survival rates after initial intake because many secured administrative positions. Jehovah's Witnesses also survived at higher rates than expected because they often received safer work assignments and supported one another through tightly connected faith communities. Criminal prisoners survived in large numbers because many held authority as capos. But pink triangle prisoners faced survival rates under 20% in some camps. They were isolated even among the condemned. Black triangle prisoners frequently died within months. Many had no support networks, no protection, no community willing to help them survive. And Jewish prisoners marked with yellow stars suffered the deadliest outcomes of all. At extermination camps like Auschwitz-Birkenau Memorial and Museum, Treblinka Extermination Camp, and Sobibor Extermination Camp, survival often approached zero. The camps existed specifically to kill them. When Allied forces liberated the camps in 1945, they discovered mountains of records preserved with obsessive precision. Even while destroying evidence of gas chambers and crematoriums, the Nazis maintained paperwork documenting every transport, every arrival, every death. These records eventually became part of the International Tracing Service archive in Germany, originally used to help survivors locate missing relatives. For decades, researchers had only limited access, but when the archive finally opened fully in 2008, historians realized the scale of what had survived. The cards tracked every stage of imprisonment. Some even listed useful skills: electrician, mechanic, doctor, carpenter. The Nazis wanted maximum labor extraction before death. Yet, for many prisoners, especially Jews, these skills meant nothing. A Jewish doctor could still be sent directly to the gas chambers. The system balanced exploitation and extermination simultaneously, and the triangle determined which priority mattered more. At Auschwitz, new arrivals entered an assembly line of death. After days packed inside sealed cattle cars, prisoners stepped onto the platform under floodlights and barking orders. Selections happened in seconds. Those capable of labor were sent in one direction. The weak, elderly women with children and the sick were sent the other. For many Jewish prisoners, especially children and older people, no registration card was ever created. They were murdered immediately after arrival. Their names vanished before the bureaucracy could record them. The evidence survives in the gaps. Transports arrived carrying thousands, but only hundreds of prisoner cards were created afterward. The missing records belonged to the invisible dead, murdered before paperwork could catch up. Years later, investigators reopened punishment cell blocks at places like Sachsenhausen Memorial and Museum and uncovered physical traces left behind by prisoners themselves. Sachsenhausen's isolation block functioned as a prison within the prison. Hidden behind walls, it housed interrogation rooms, torture chambers, and solitary confinement cells. Prisoners endured starvation, beatings, and pole hanging, where victims were suspended by arms tied behind their backs until their shoulders dislocated and muscles tore apart. Some died under torture, others survived, permanently crippled. Among those imprisoned was Georg Elser, the man who nearly assassinated Hitler in 1939. When researchers examined the surviving cells decades later, not through futuristic technology, not through genetic, prisoners had carved proof of their existence into the building itself. One cell, known as Cell 1, drew particular attention. Some inscriptions had been hidden beneath plaster after the war, when Soviet authorities reused the camp as an internment facility. Using thermal imaging, researchers uncovered concealed writings beneath the walls, final messages to families, names of guards, dates of torture, desperate prayers, and declarations of resistance. The cells also yielded fragments of uniforms. On some scraps, faded triangles remained visible: red, pink, yellow. Each fragment represented a human being reduced to a category. The opening of the archives transformed how historians understood the camps. The triangle system was not simply administrative, it was psychological warfare. By assigning visible categories, the Nazis engineered division inside the prisoner population itself. Prisoners did not suffer only under guards. They were forced into competition against one another for survival. The triangle became an identity. Eventually, it became destiny. Even after the war ended, many survivors continued suffering because of those classifications. Pink Triangle prisoners returned to societies where homosexuality remained criminalized. Paragraph 175 survived in West Germany until 1969. Many men who survived the camps could still be prosecuted afterward for the same crime that imprisoned them. Black Triangle prisoners were frequently denied recognition as victims at all. Roma and Sinti persecution remained ignored for decades. Jewish survivors carried the yellow star as both trauma and remembrance. The badge meant humiliation, exclusion, hunger, violence, and constant proximity to death. Yet over time, it also became a symbol of memory and survival. Today, the Arolsen archives contain more than 30 million documents. Families still search them to trace relatives who disappeared into the camps. And when historians first studied that faded triangle chart recovered from Dachau, they realized it represented more than bureaucracy. It represented a worldview. A belief that human beings could be sorted, ranked, labeled, and assigned value based entirely on identity. The consequences of that belief remain preserved in survival statistics, registration cards, prisoner testimonies, and the words scratched into prison walls by dying inmates. The triangle was never just cloth sewn onto a uniform. It was extermination turned into a visual system. And even now, 80 years later, the faded colors still speak. Red, green, pink, purple, black, yellow. Each color a life, each color a warning. Because the camps may be silent now, but the records remain. And they reveal how quickly civilization collapses when people begin sorting human beings into categories of worth.